And we are live. Okay, well, welcome to Hell in a Handbasket, everybody. I'm Bradley.
And I'm none your business.
And today we
Today,
want to talk about more Trump election stuff. But we're not the only ones. Obviously, this is the hottest everything. The discussion that I guess Trump is back in the headlines. Maybe he
well,
never
yeah,
really left.
it's the biggest story. The biggest geopolitical story there is how a Trump election win. Now that that's in the bag, we've had about a week or so to kind of take it all in, and we're starting to see how the world is reacting to it. So we wanted to really just chat about that a little bit today.
That's right. And so we're recording today is what Tuesday. So when was open mic? Was it on Sunday? I think it was on Sunday last
Sunday.
time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Sunday.
Man, that was I know that was a challenging open mic. I don't know how the people who watch open mic sat through that and powered through that. You guys are badasses. There was a lot of stuff going on. People hopping on, people talking over each other. We had some Polish guy.
Once everybody started yelling at each other, I left. I was like, okay, I gotta go eat.
I couldn't even. I was trying to keep with it, but it was too much. So I had to go. But then it chilled out later. I hopped back on later. And once the English practice was over, and but yeah, it was definitely not just that, but a lot of the panelists stuck around for it too. And then there was that epic debate between. Of course, it's always interesting when Wayne shows up, right? Mm-hmm. He's like our resident, kind of like, I don't know, like people like to shit on him a lot, right? But he shows up and continues to do it. So it's almost like, is he getting off on this or whatever? But Bigari and Wayne got into it. Bigari got to the point where he was just like, shut up. No, you may not speak. You are a moron. I was just like, oh my gosh. I mean, Bigari's not the easiest person to get along with, but he definitely does not tolerate, complete idiocy. So
it's all good.
I don't want to say that about Wayne. I wonder what's going on with that guy. Maybe it's a bit of an act. Maybe he's just like an old guy that's like hanging out with young kids and thinks it's funny. I have no idea.
I don't know. I don't give him much thought, to be honest with you. I want to talk about Trump. I think
Wayne, yes.
When we last met a week ago, or was it 6 days ago? It was the day after the election, and everything was still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
Now that we've had several days, I think we've seen how the world is starting to react to the Trump win, and particularly some of the world leaders. And I think that, and I said this last week, I specifically remember saying something along the lines of, Trump promised to stop these wars, and we need to hold him accountable now. And the reason I said that at the time was I didn't believe for a second that Trump would stop these wars. And given some of the rhetoric that I've heard in the last week, and more importantly, some of the picks that he's made, it seems like a whole lot of neocons, and that doesn't bode well for Ukrainians or Israelis or Palestinians, for that matter. So I don't see there being a whole major shift in U.S. policy to either of these. I think tactically they may change a little bit, but that's about it.
Yeah, well, just to put not to put too fine of a point on it, but I mean, Trump expected to have Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. So,
and
that's a neocon right there.
Well, and we can talk about him now since you just threw him up. I sent you that clip of him just today.
Yeah.
Put that up on the screen if you have it, because it'll pretty much tell you everything that you need to know about Marco Rubio's views on Israel. Now, Marco Rubio, he's a neocon. He's an establishment guy. He's definitely a war hawk. He's definitely got it out for China for some strange reason.
There's people so excited.
Oh yeah, play this. This just happened today, I believe, or yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why are the Jewish people so excited? Let's hear it.
Why are the Jewish people so excited that Marco Rubio will be the next Secretary of State? This is why.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire
No, I will
in
not.
Gaza?
On the
Senator
contrary.
Rubio,
Are you filming it?
wait,
I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas should stop building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
Yeah, look at that fucking smug cockiness.
So that tells you, I mean, it's not like he minces his words here. He's pretty clear and straight up. So that is the rumored new Secretary of State for the United States.
God
that guy. Yeah. So that doesn't, and the fact that also today Trump announced that Mike Huckabee will be, who is a, former governor and also like hardcore one of these evangelical types.
Yeah,
I believe he's also a minister. Yeah. So he was named as U.S. ambassador to Israel today. So I think when you put him and the Rubios of the world together, kind of tells you everything you need to know about the policy in Israel. Nothing's going to change. And if anything, it might escalate.
Well, for the policy in Israel, I feel like Donald Trump, who does he owe his victory to? It's his followers, it's his supporters, right? But he's already kind of floated the Israel-Palestine issue under their nose, and he's put himself hardcore on the Israel side, right? So, yeah, I think he owes it to them. He owes it to Adelson or Adelson's wife. They probably funded him to a great extent, to the point, and that's not free,
Sure, but
so he even said it. Didn't he say something about like, I would tell them, please give me some time before I give you the next, thing on Israel.
Sure,
so,
but he also owes it to the people in Dearborn, Michigan, who he lied to a few days before the election, and he told them he was going to stop the war. Right now, they were fools. Anybody who voted for Trump in Dearborn, Michigan, thinking that he'd stop the war, they were probably being, overly optimistic and kind of naive. But the fact is, he said it, and he also said that he was going to stop all wars.
When he says stop the war in Palestine, I don't think he means like I never got from him the feeling of like, oh, stop the war from Palestine means that I'm going to cramp Bibi's style in some way.
Well, that's true. He didn't say, did he say I'll stop the war or that I'll finish the war? Right? Like two very different things, right?
Yeah,
I'll end the war. Yeah, he didn't say how the wars were going to end, right? So
yeah, I think he's unapologetically in the Zionist camp.
No question. Yeah,
and he's not in a position, I think, like to even back down from that. He owes those people too much. He probably owes those people a huge amount of this current victory that he has. So he's going to, I think he's going to keep like going full forward in that direction. I think he's going to maybe have some personal clashes with, Netanyahu, maybe some of the other Ben-Gvirs or whatever. But I don't think that he's going to do anything that is going to upset in a great way the Israel lobby. I agree. I don't see that.
I agree, and I don't think that the U.S. wants to necessarily disengage in the Middle East with Iran. So I also think that that's a card that they potentially want to play. So yeah, I don't see there being any change, unfortunately, in the Middle East right now. The only way I can see things changing is if other players start to get involved and escalate it on the other side. And that's when, it's fine when Israelis are dying. It's fine when Ukrainians are dying. But if you want to get into World War III, that requires a rethink. So, I can see us going down that road too. But I don't see it ending well for us. I don't see Iran as being a nation state that anybody would really want to mess with.
Nope. And I think that so I look at, remember Biden pulling out of Afghanistan, and at the time a lot of people on the liberal left, let's say, gave him a lot of credit for that, saying, oh well, he ended the forever war, right? But we know that he ended, quote unquote, ended the forever wars because they were trying to pivot to Russia. And maybe Trump tries to pivot from Russia back to the Middle East, back to Israel, back to something that's more his wheelhouse, sort of. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had about what direction that he maybe personally wants to go, and but I think the other part of the equation is what opportunities does he have to go in the directions that he might want to go. So if he wants to go hardcore, full forward, fast forward on Israel, right? Oh, you best believe he's going to find the political capital to do that. But if you want to say we're going to severely cut aid to Ukraine, for example, I think it's going to be a whole different ballgame. I think it's going to come up with a lot of resistance. And from the Marco Rubios, I don't know how personal Marco Rubio. I know he said he's been a complete war hawk on the Russia-Ukraine war stuff, but you don't have a different choice. So I don't know what his personal thing is. Is he is he going to gun for China? Is he really a Zionist like that? Or is that just a show?
Rubio's a China hawk. I don't think he's a Russia hawk.
Okay.
I'd never gotten that sense. I think Rubio, from a couple things that I've heard him say, is basically been, like the rest of us, why are we even there? Why are we even in this thing?
No, I've heard him say some,
all politicians, yeah, of course, right? If you're an American politician, you have to say that. But I think that the war in Ukraine is going to go very differently than the war in Israel, because and I've been saying this for a long time, right? They were just trying to get to November, and then after November, after the election, that's when all the bad news hits. And the way I kind of look at Ukraine, and we're starting to see articles of that, and I sent you a couple if you want to throw them up. The way I kind of see the U.S. stance on it, regardless, if Harris won or if Trump won, same outcome. And that was no more funding. Europe, you're going to have to start footing the bill. You're going to have to start putting, feet on the ground, whatever it may be. You're going to have to start reducing your own standards of living to pay for more weapons. Your master is telling you, vassals, get on board. And I think that that's what the marching orders are for the European elite now. Anthony Blinken is actually over in Brussels right now as we speak, to round up the European leaders and basically, in a nutshell, give them their marching orders of what the plan is going to be. And the plan is going to be something along the lines of, we're going to try to push through as much aid before Trump comes in to office. After that, you guys are on your own. So what that means is you're all going to have to do whatever it is you need to do, float Euro bonds, cut spending, whatever it is, keep the weapons going. And more importantly, if we need troops, you better start coming up with a plan to round them up. And you're starting to hear about this. There was an article in the Telegraph today. Boris Johnson was talking about having to send UK military soldiers over to Ukraine if the U.S. doesn't continue supporting aid. So that's former prime minister said that. And then you've got Macron, Emmanuel Macron. I sent you an article or a clip. He talked today about doubling the French defense budget. You've also got Keir Starmer, who's making similar overtures. The only person who's actually not, it seems, is the German government, but they just fell apart within the last week, so they're irrelevant. But
I don't have those articles that you that you were talking about. If you can send them to the private chat, then I'll pull them up. Because I'm looking through the Telegraph's website right now. I'm not seeing that one.
Oh, they were JPEGs. They were just pictures.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then I definitely don't have access to those. Let me see. But if I'm browsing over the Telegraph, we're trying to find the Boris.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I just mentioned it anyways. Like basically, it was one talking about Macron. Emmanuel Macron announced that France is going to double its military budget, as he said, to build European security independent of America. So that was just today he said that. So to double your defense budget is pretty significant. So for them to do that is also very significant. You also had Joseph Borrell, who he's the EU's foreign affairs minister. He said that just today as well, that Europe is in danger and it cannot depend on the will of the American voters every 4 years. In other words, what Borrell was saying was the same thing Macron was saying. We need to pick up the slack for our own defense. So the fact that Sturmer and, like you have on the screen, Boris Johnson and Joseph Borrell and Emmanuel Macron, the fact that they're all saying this at the same time tells you that it's a coordinated effort. And they've got their marching orders from somebody. My guess is Blinken. And now Europe is going to have to jump or push back. I'm guessing they're going to jump. They don't seem like they have much will to push back on anyone. So the way I kind of see Ukraine going is Europe will try to stumble along for the next several months, but they're going to come up with the realization that, number one, they don't have any weapons. Number two, they don't have any soldiers. Number three, they've got a public who's not on board. And then it's all going to fall apart. And that's when it'll be, okay, Russia, we're ready to talk now.
Really? I mean,
that's what I think. Yeah.
That almost feels like the almost the worst case scenario that they would want to avoid. But I mean, you look at what Boris Johnson is saying, and what's the famous joke that the entire British army could fit in Wembley Stadium, something like that.
Yeah, and so, still would be half empty. But and that's the thing, right? Like you're right, it's a bad plan, but they don't appear to be willing to accept reality yet. And the reality is, well, the reality is they've lost the war, right? And either they keep limping along and keep, expending all sorts of money that they don't have and potentially losing troops that they don't have. They can keep doing that and continue to fail for another few months, or they can accept reality and say, okay, it's time to put an end to this. Let's go talk to Russia. Let's discuss some terms, right? That's what the pragmatic approach would be, but they're not there yet.
So let's brainstorm this. What options does Trump really have? So he tries to cut aid to Ukraine and pawn off Ukraine onto the EU, which I agree probably would be some part of the plan, right? At least that was the Harris plan too, by the way. Like I'm convinced that they were just trying to get to the election. End of story. So the outcome would have been the same for Ukraine either way. I don't want to blame this all on Trump. Yeah, that's a good point, because if you look, let me see here. Is this the right article? If you look, they even bring it up. They say that so this is Reuters. So it's as British propaganda as it gets, right? I hope Biden administration will avoid this risk by accelerating the speed of its help, the official said. So that's what you're saying, that you think that they will do that. So let's see. Putin set out his terms for an end to the war. In June, Ukraine would have to drop its NATO ambitions and withdraw its troops from all the territory of the four regions claimed by Russia, something Kiev sees as akin to capitulation. Ukraine's public is skeptical. Russia is interested in talks, but the central demand, if they happen, is for Ukraine to receive proper security guarantees, says Anton Grushetsky, executive director of the Chris Pollster. Anyway, Ukrainians, okay, here's the paragraph I was looking for. Ukrainians lean towards wanting Democrat Kamala Harris to win the election. but frustration at the reluctance of outgoing President Joe Biden's administration to increase support meant that they were increasingly open to gamble on Trump. So they're saying, you see, people were very disappointed that behind the very strong words of the Biden administration, the real steps were much weaker, especially over the last year. So what is that telling us? That's telling us that you're right. They are already winding down Ukraine. Ukraine is already being.
They've been winding down Ukraine since last year. And you know, anybody who's, if you've been watching DPA open mic or something, you know that, right? You know, this is not something that's new for any of us that's been paying attention. You know, I think that it is what it is. They basically, you have a parasite known as NATO who found a host in Ukraine, and they've bled it as much as they can. And, you know, once the metal hits the meat, they'll pull out. Now, the question then will be, what becomes of Ukraine? Like, I think they're starting to realize what a big problem this is for them. They had so much stock put into defeating Russia, and they still do, by the way, that if they lose, what becomes of Ukraine? What becomes of all those refugees? It's going to be chaos in Europe. And they know that, right? So, you know, I think they're realizing that not only are they going to lose this war militarily, the aftermath of what comes after the war, that's even more vicious, because you're going to have all sorts of mass refugees moving over to Western Europe. You're going to have this rump state right in, you know, Eastern Europe that's just destroyed, and it's just, you know, what do you do with that? And what are the people in Ukraine going to do with that? And who's going to help them, right? Will it be Europe? I have my doubts.
How? With what? Like, what are they?
Right.
They were trying to eat Ukraine for dinner in the first place because they needed
it.
I
said this 2 years ago to somebody. I said, you know who's going to rebuild Ukraine once it's all done? Russia, because Russia is the only country in the world that cares about the Ukrainians.
That
truly
actually cares. That's the funny thing. The Ukrainians, I'll have discussions with them on Twitter, hardcore Ukrainians, and you can sense the shift in the mood a little bit, even before the Trump election, and now it's even accelerated. It feels like, where you talk to them and they'll basically be saying that, well, we can't. Shit, I forgot what I was going to say. Fuck.
Well, you mentioned Bagari, right? He's Ukrainian. He'll tell you everything. Like he knows what the score is.'s right there, right? And pretty blunt about the general mood of the people in Ukraine, right? So
yeah, but they can sort of. I feel like a lot of them knew that if this would not go our way, oh boy, will there be hell to pay. So that makes them even more reluctant to do it now, right? Because you know what you did. It's like a, you know, if you have ever had like a dog that did something, you know, naughty, and you're just like, who did that? And you can see that, you know, that it's uncomfortable, like, ooh, anything but that, you know? Can we please be friends? I don't want to be held accountable for my actions. So I think there's that going on where they're like, ooh, like, if we don't pull this off, we will be screwed. And as the walls start to close in, you'll see that people, they'll be panicked and then they'll cope, and then they'll panic and then they'll cope. So, but slowly, I think that it is getting through. I mean, look, this article is from Vox, right? And this came out in April of this year. Ukraine is finally getting more U.S. aid. It won't win the war, but it can save them from defeat. By the way, I don't know how that makes sense. Like,
it doesn't
win the war, but but you know, like they're talking about it. They know that, even if they want to put a caveat and sugarcoat it in. Oh well, you know, it doesn't mean that they have to lose, but they won't win. So this is already being talked about. So yeah, Ukraine is slowly disappearing, right? The Ukraine project is slowly failing. What can be done is probably like there's probably all hands on deck in the EU right now, people going absolutely bonkers trying to figure out what can we do. And that's why you see these like really weird optimistic statements, you know, from Boris Johnson, like, oh, we may have to put our troops there. I don't even think he's like bluffing. I think this is like literally all hands on deck, panic mode type of reasoning, you know, like, well, what can we do? We can do this, we can do that. You know, you're not going to say it like that in public, you know, you're going to have to put it in a way that people can consume.
Well, I don't think anybody in the UK gives Boris Johnson much time in these days. He's a caricature of himself. He's a cartoon. So, but to your point, the fact that a former prime minister is saying that on the same day the other people, that tells me that it's all coordinated. Yeah. Now, the big problem that they're going to run into, obviously, is reality. And all of these elite ivory tower types, they are so disconnected from what you and me think, right? That once they start putting this to the test, they're going to get tossed out. Like, people are going to revolt. And, you know, that's why Trump won. People revolted. That's why all these governments in Europe are falling. People are revolting, right? Because they see this globalist thing, this globalist power that has infected the West in the last 10 years. They realize now how damaging it really is to everybody. And they're rejecting it outright. Like, everybody's rejecting it. Everybody's rejecting it. So, you know, Boris Johnson and Macron and all these just out of touch people, they can say what they want. Nobody's going to listen to them. At the end of the day, when Macron tries to put through a budget that doubles the defense budget, and that has to cut something elsewhere, and then people in France will revolt because they like doing that anyway, that's what'll happen. It'll get shot down. Same thing with Starmer.
Trump said he could end the Ukraine war, right? That was kind of his thing. And I'm sure that most people didn't take that literally, right? Like, oh yeah, within 24 hours he can end the Ukraine. People probably got the idea. This is Donald Trump's manner of speaking, his kind of bullshitting manner of speaking, right? Mm-hmm. But you get the thought, you get what he's saying. You know, he's like, well, it's like saying, oh, if that guy tries to show his face around here, I'm gonna kick his butt to kingdom come, right? Or whatever, from the drunk next to you or whatever. You get the idea. What he's saying is, fuck that guy, right? He's not saying literally, I'm going to kick his butt so hard that it's going to traverse space-time and land itself into wherever kingdom come is, right? So it's like, that's not what that means. And so when Donald Trump says that, like, that's not what that means. What he's saying is, this is their failure. This is their fault. This one would have been easy for me. It would have never even happened. And right now, they're not doing jack shit. Put me in there. I'll actually do something. I'll do it right away. I'll do it within 24 hours. Go ahead.
And you know what? He might be right. Because if I was Trump, what I would say, yeah, I did do it within 24 hours. I told the Europeans we're not funding them anymore. And I told the Europeans the onus is on them now to put on their big boy pants and go fight some Russians. So promise made, promise kept, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's how I would say it if I was Trump, right? We're not funding this loser. He called Ukraine a loser. He said Ukraine is a loser. He said that a couple of weeks ago at a rally. So do I think American involvement in Ukraine will end? Do I think American funding? No, I don't think it will end. Do I think American funding will end? Yes. But they'll still be in the background, you know, like with the marionette, just playing the rest of the Europeans. Because you got to keep the vassals in line, right? Now, the problem is the vassals are starting to push back. And
where their people are, not the Macron. Really, I feel like that's his pressure on him. I think he's a globalist.
Macron he's a different kind of animal. Like, he's not bright at all. He's like Trudeau. They're really, really stupid people. and they've drunk the globalist WEF, World Economic Forum Kool-Aid. So you got to discard them because they're not real thinkers anymore. I think they're just bimbos. They're male bimbos, and that's all you can say about them. But I think more pragmatic leaders in the EU are looking at their populations, and they're saying, well, like the guy Lindner who got fired in Germany, right? The finance minister, he got canned because he wouldn't add Ukraine funding to the budget. Said we can't afford it, so Schultz canned him. So you're starting to see a lot more of that.
He didn't just do that. He said send him Taurus missiles instead. That's hilarious. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
It's just like, and I think that's what broke apart the Traffic Light Coalition too, which is just hilarious. Maybe I should be paying more attention to German politics because that whole drama seems like it was pretty entertaining to watch play out.
Well, here at the end of the day, right? Germany is on fire right now. Absolute fire in a bad way. Their economy is crumbling.
Yeah, under systematic
crumbling
deindustrialization.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's happening really rapidly. And the problem with that is the only real economy in Europe is Germany's, right? So Germany goes, so goes the rest of Europe, right?
Italy
You think
too, right?
Not really. Like, who the frig is buying handbags these days? No, it's heavy industry in Germany, chemicals, stuff like that, right? That's what drives the European economy. And they can't make a go of it anymore because they're paying 4 times more for gas than they were a few years ago. So, if the German economy crumbles, the whole EU economy crumbles, right? You think Slovenia is going to pick up the slack? Fuck no. Right? Like, you basically have Italy, you have Germany, France, and Italy. That's about it. And then you got a bunch of have-not states.
I like Michael Hudson, the economist, very famous, brilliant genius economist, right? Who says that the Ukraine war was primarily, he says it's primarily, first and foremost, a war against Europe, not a war against Russia. It's a war to lock in and permanently cleave the EU away from the rest of the world, to marry it to the US hegemony project. As we move into this sort of multipolar world and we try to ramp up for the next phase of the Cold War 2.0, that we're going to be we're going to have the Europeans that they're not by our side because they want to, they're by our side because they're screwed. They need us for the gas. They need us for the economy, that we're going to be purchasing their shit because, they're going to need us for a lot of this. They're going to need us for a lot of what they used to be able to get from other places or even do themselves.
Sure.
And I think that's the plan, to basically do rent, to be able to charge them rent prices, monopoly prices for whatever it is. And you know what? Who cares if the German economy tanks? Whatever. People are going to buy fewer BMWs. Maybe they'll buy more Lincolns. I don't think that we're too concerned. I personally.
Well, and there's where it's all going to fail, because people vote with their wallets. And
as you love to say.
Yeah, and they when you start chipping away at somebody's standard of living, that affects them more than probably anything.
It's all
what I
about
mean?
The Benjamins.
Well, it's about security. It's about being able to feed your family. It's about, being able to do things for your kids, all that other stuff. So, the fact that the German economy is crumbling should be very concerning to Germans. And they're not going to,
It is.
yeah, and they're not going to put up with these globalist hacks anymore, right? They're all getting tossed out. And they might get violently tossed out.
I don't know. I think the Germans are going to grip them with an iron fist, and they're going to crack down on the German population like like the communists never did. Like we've never seen before
Well,
they.
then you're going to watch a civil war happen because the Germans won't put up with that. Like you can push the Germans so far, but like I said, when you start messing with somebody's standard of living, that's a whole another level. And then you think the French are going to put up with this? Oh God,
I have
the French.
more faith in the French than I do in the Germans. But both the French and the Germans have massively militarized their police over the last decade. So I think that they anticipated this. I think they anticipated that there would be potential issues with, following Brexit, following the Trump election, and we need to put in place mechanisms that allow us to be able to, put our thumb on the scale in the way that we deem fit, right? So
I don't know, man. I see Germany leaving the EU within 10 years.
I'd be very interesting, and I think if they do, good for them. So anyway, just to kind of wrap up what can Trump do in terms of Ukraine, and by pawning it off to, he could try to, so he can't. Let's say, for example, Trump tries to end the war, right? He tries to talk to Zelensky. Zelensky's political survival is directly tied to the war, right? Zelensky won't be on board. Zelensky's become the dictator of Ukraine and, shutting down the press and outlawing Russian language. And he probably actually answers to hardcore nationalists surrounding him to a huge extent. And these nationalists have actually threatened to kill him, if he tries to make peace with Russia. So I think he answers to them. And I think he answers to people in the US deep state, UK, whatever it is. He doesn't answer to the Ukrainian people. So that he's in a position where he's not going to play ball. A, B, right? Putin is the complete opposite of the ledger here, right? Because he's actually facing domestic pressure to go harder, to demand more and compromise less, and to try to accelerate and hasten the collapse of the AFU. And I think his space is actually more to maneuver is actually more limited than many people in the West think, because unlike Zelensky, he's not actually a dictator. You can't just outlaw this or do that, because there's actually there is a political process and a political elite and all this other stuff that puts the domestic pressure on Putin. So Putin can't make a compromise, shall we say, precisely because he can't just wave his wand and say this is the way it's going to be. Well, Zelensky doesn't have to make compromises because he is, and the people he actually answers to, these elements within Ukraine and the people that put them in power in the first place. So even now, if you look at the news, the Ukrainians are talking about how they're going to change the sale pitch for Trump, saying not all hope is lost. Yes, they're very doom and gloom about Trump's win, but they're saying not all hope is lost, and there's ways that we can talk to Trump. He's a vain man, so let me see if I could find that article where they were literally saying that all we got to do is say, hey, Ukraine has massive natural resources. Are you sure you want to give that up to China of all places? Try to get him on that play to that side of Trump's.
I don't think he cares. I think Trump is so sick of Ukraine because, keep in mind, his history with Ukraine goes back many years. If you recall, it was that Zelensky phone call. Remember that
over the impeachment.
Yeah. So I think he's so sick of Ukraine, he can't wait to wash his hands of it. But he also needs to play the geopolitical ball. And that's why I'm saying there won't be any more funding, but the U.S. will still be there, directing things and having a presence. But no, I think the direction now is totally push it off on the Europeans. See what cannon fodder we can find next. Some Poles, some Estonians, some whatever. And you Europeans, you're all going to have to give more to the collection plate, and you're all going to have to get taxed more so we buy more weapons, and you're going to have to do without because, freedom, whatever. That's what they're going to try. And that's going to last for about 30 seconds before people say, And
Yeah.
Europeans are done with this war too. And they have been for quite a while. So I think that, they are, man. They're totally done with this. I
think it depends which Europeans. I think if you go to more Eastern Europe, there's more popular.
I don't agree with that either. Yes,
Really?
It's more popular than in Spain. Yes, I agree with you. But is it popular in Estonia? No. I think if you were to ask the majority of Estonians, they would say, you know what, before this war, we had a great relationship with our neighbors. We could go over to Russia. We could buy cheap stuff. We could come back. Ask the Finns. They'll all tell you that. Right?
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, I guess that's not the conversations I've had, but I think the people that are really vocal about this stuff online tend to be very pro-NATO a lot of the time.
Sure. But, your everyday people, they don't care about any of this stuff. Your everyday people, you know what they're pissed off about? They can't go talk to their friend Sergey across the border. They can't go shop. They can't go get cheap Russian gas. This is what I talk about, standard of living and everything, right? Mm-hmm. All that stuff goes out the window when you can't make rent. Okay? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay? And none of those people in Estonia, Latvia, forget about what you read about in the paper. Forget about what Kaya Kallis or some retard like that saying. Think about like your everyday person who just used to go shop in Russia or has family in Russia, whatever, or has family, right? Like these are Russians, a lot of them are ethnic Russians too. The ties go deep and they go very long, right? Like you got all sorts of Finns who are married to Russians and vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's an imaginary line. So I think if you were to ask like people out on the street, like in those places, you go to Tallinn, somewhere like that, nah, they don't want this. None of them want this. They'd rather go back to how things were, which wasn't actually that bad. Like, Russia was never, a threat to Estonia. Why would it be? So
it's hardcore Russophobic propaganda that has been going on for a while, right? They did the same thing with Ukraine, and so there was a lot of work put into trying to cleave the Ukrainians from the Russians. The Holodomor myth, for example, the hunger of 1930. What was it?
Right. But the thing about the propaganda is it's for old people, right? Like there's an Estonian CNN and there's a Latvian MSNBC, right? And they're feeding those boomers over there with all of this crap and they're buying into it. But same thing with here in the West, younger people are not buying into it. Younger people can see. And that's what I'm saying. Like nobody in Europe really buys into this anymore. They see through the propaganda now. They know that they've been lied to 8 ways from Sunday, right? About the Russians having to fight with shovels because they've got no weapons. And it's just a matter of time. Like all this stuff that they were lied to for years and years is now coming home to roost, and you're supposed to say, well, gee, you've been telling us for 2.5 years that we were winning, and now all of a sudden we're losing. How does that math work?
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. I don't think I share your optimism for that, but I would love to be proven wrong about that. I'd love for it, because I mean, I think that if that is the case, then that's going to be the silent majority.
I think it is, but you're seeing silent majorities everywhere for all sorts of topics, right? Like, look at the woke topic. Silent majority is not on board with that. And the polls show that, and the election results show that. Like, so all this stuff that we've been propagandized with the last 10 years, and it's really been the last 10 years, primarily, all this stuff that we've been flooded with, being told what to think, doesn't work. Nobody buys it anymore. We all see through it now. And that's the thing.
It's very, very optimistic of you, I think.
Here's what's going to happen. Here's what I think will happen. Russia's going to push all the way to the river. And I've been saying this for at least a year. Russia's going to push all the way to the river. They're going to say, okay, do you guys want to negotiate now? If they say yes, great. If they say no, Okay, fine, we're taking Odessa, and we're going to finish up taking what we want. I think Putin will probably offer, like, get to the river, control those 4 oblasts, and then he's going to say, okay, would you like to talk now? If the answer is yes, they'll negotiate a peace based on Russia's terms, and Russia will offer them the carrot of Odessa and access to the sea. If the answer is still stupidly no, they're going to take the whole thing, and that'll be the end of it. They'll push who they need out, and that'll be the end of it. So, and I think that that's coming certainly within next year. Like, we won't be talking about Ukraine in a year's time from now. It just won't happen. It's going to be done.
A lot of people a lot of EU officials, just like Boris Johnson, they're just demonstrating that stubborn, like, we'll go it alone kind of thing, and it feels like so emotionally charged.
So
a
Boris,
lot of this Russia stuff. That's the thing about a lot of this Russia stuff.
But you're missing the point.
Emotionally charged.
It's not, though. It's emotionally charged for Boris Johnson. Nobody else.
That's what I mean. I mean for Boris Johnson. I mean for Reuters. I mean for the New York Times. I don't mean that it's emotionally charging for my neighbor. Like, people in America have largely, especially casual news observers, have largely started to tune out of a lot of this Ukraine war stuff. So that's part of the reason I feel like Zelensky can come out there and say, "Oh, there's a victory plan," right? And people don't really know what's going on. They see Ukraine victory plan, like, and that's all of their. That's as much as they're paying attention. But even for those people, the whisperings have already started, as the articles they showed before, where they're already starting to say, hey, listen, like, so Ukraine's not going to win this war. Just we're just saying that straight up, right? And this is nothing like what they were saying before, right? The people that would say Ukraine is going to lose this war were persona non grata. Let's think about John Mearsheimer, right? Who's like, he was already a rock star of geopolitics before, but after this Ukraine war stuff, it absolutely blew up. He was skyrocketed past his former public profile. He's almost like a household name, and a lot of it is over the Ukraine war, right? A lot of it is basically, I've heard people grudgingly on the let's say pro-Ukraine war side, right? People grudgingly saying that, well, his reputation as the man who predicted the Ukraine war is massively overblown. So, I mean, that tells me that that's kind of how he's looked on. Because remember, when the Ukraine war was in its, people didn't know if it was going to happen or not, right? There was a lot of mainstream media that was saying this is not going to happen. And even think tanks later on, what was it? CSIS were doing their postmortem on why we suck at predictions, basically. I mean, putting it more bluntly, obviously, probably doesn't deserve to be put that way, but
well, it's because of hubris. Like, American military planners still seem to think that it's 1991, and there's all this military capability that America has that no other country has. And the reality is America has no real capabilities anymore, and they've been surpassed in a lot of ways. So
I think it's the Michael McFalls who think that,
sure.
The Victoria Newlands. I don't think that people, like, remember Mark Milley when he came out and he's like, now's a good time to negotiate. Remember when he did that whole thing and he got pounded, right? Like,
right.
I was just like, oh, wow. I actually gained a lot of respect from Mark Milley. I'm like, okay, the dude is looking on the ground, right? And I mean, I didn't really know a lot what to think about what was exactly going on, right? I mean, there's a lot of misinformation. This was earlier on in the war, but he was saying that, hey, do it now, right? Negotiate now.
And he said that, well, it was over a year ago he said that. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. They've known that this is a loser for a long time, but they keep going.
Those guys knew. But see, what I mean is when the rest of the press dogpiled on him, this is what I mean, where it seems emotional and visceral, because it's almost like, whoa, but you mean to say that you don't want Ukraine to achieve their maximal war aims? So in other words, you're a Putin puppet kind of like that's it. That's the level of discourse that we're allowed to have. And
yeah, they're morons. That's how morons argue, right?
So those guys think that. And I was watching an interview with Ted Postal, a professor from MIT, who's I think he's a nuclear and rocket kind of like scientist, and he was discussing how what were we just talking about? Sorry, I got
Ted Postal, rockets.
Yeah, right before that. But I was listening to Ted Postal get interviewed. It was the Daniel Davis deep dive. He was saying that shit. God damn, dude! I need to make my coffee stronger before I freaking hop on. I can't remember what I was talking about. Jesus, I'm turning into Biden here.
This is what happens when a couple potheads try to get on and talk about geopolitics.
Pot is that illegal narcotic substance?
Legal for me. I don't know what you're dealing.
What we're talking about.
Yeah. So I think with respect to Ukraine, like I said, Putin's going to the river. If he goes to the river and they negotiate, this thing will be over in like 3 months. If they don't, it'll be over in.
Hold up! I forgot. I remember what I was going to say.
8 months.
8 months. Okay, that's an interesting prediction. Hold that thought though, because I want to come back to that. But Ted Postal was basically saying that no way, now I forgot it again. Shit. Okay, it'll come back to me later. All right.
So I mean, well, that's kind of where I see Ukraine going, and then the Middle East, God only knows. I think that if they escalate it with Iran, then you've got other Middle East players might get involved. You'll have Russia somehow being involved. It'll be a mess. So let's hope that doesn't happen.
Ted Postal. I remember what I was going to say. Sorry, everybody, for my Joe Biden moment, senior citizen moment. But he was talking about a conference or a speech, something where he went to where Michael McFaul spoke, right? And if people don't know Michael McFaul, he was the ambassador to Russia under, I think, Obama. He's a notorious Putin whisperer, right? He's one of those that everything boils down to Putin. Putin is an evil dictator. Russia is trying to fight a war of aggressive expansion. They're not threatened by NATO. He supposedly really believes that NATO is a benign hegemon. You know, the U.S. is a benign hegemon. NATO is a defensive-only alliance. There's nothing to be concerned about. So Ted Postal starts talking to him about, well, the reality on the ground in the Ukraine war. And he says, this guy didn't know anything. He didn't know that Ukraine was losing the war. He didn't know about the casualty figures. So, and I asked him, and he said, well, what do you expect me to know everything? So, and what they know is not what people like Ted Postal have to say. That's not what they're interested in, right? They have their own thing. And I think that there's been a couple of times where they felt like they were justified. Like everybody thought, for example, that if Russia invaded Ukraine, it would be the bombing of Baghdad, right? It would be Yugoslavia. That's what people thought. But what happened was something completely different. And so these people come out and they say, oh, we were right. Russia is a paper tiger. They do have barely an economy. Putin doesn't enjoy widespread popular support. We've been vindicated. And I think that's why it's hard to hear somebody like Mark Milley say, guys, now's the good time to do it. Because if you have a completely abstract misunderstanding, let's say, of what force and what can be accomplished through force and what kinds of forces are available and for what periods of times and for what reasons, if you're completely confused about that and you're thinking about this completely from a let's say liberal perspective, right, where you're just trying to spread liberalism and you're like, that's a dictator, so we should reserve the right to use military force against those who perpetrate genocide, put aside the fact that nobody's doing anything about the current genocide that's ongoing. So we need to be able to do that. So there's those people. There's the people that are hardcore in the liberal globalist kind of mindset. I don't want to use the term globalist there. In general, that term is a little bit overused sometimes, and I think that it has room for confusion for people that are listening. But in general,
I think it's really easy to define. I define a globalist as this sort of neoliberal view of the world that, you know, it's a borderless, you know, state whereby, you know, basically everybody is citizens of the world and they're trying to establish this one world government. That's basically what it all comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even hide it. Like, you go on the WEF's website and watch some of their videos of the sessions that they have and read some of their papers. It's all right there. These people are, they're completely bonkers. Completely bonkers.
Yeah, I've read Yuval Noah Harari. I have one of his books. I should get his big one. I don't have his like really famous one. But I feel like, you know, it probably says a lot of the same stuff. So anyway, I'd say if we're trying to wind down a little bit closer to an hour this time, maybe we should move on to 2 scoops of crazy. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do our 2 scoops. So you throw them up and I guess we'll start talking about them.
All right. So let's do the videos then, the ones that we have queued.
So these are some more post-Trump meltdown videos. There's been a big movement the last several days online for people, if you haven't noticed. But there's a couple things that people are starting to do. One, there's a women shave your head movement. So let's this
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, so
with this is the only thing we have left to control ourselves. Oh man. Hopefully you can like control your bladder. We'll continue to fight and stand with every woman and minority.
I love how the woman shaving her head is singing.
Her determined, she got the determined face.
I love how she's singing along.
I don't mean. What is this? Okay, you shaved your head. Nice. I mean, I'm gonna guess that. Alright, you really showed them.
Oh, great. So, yeah. I don't know what like that proves.
Like, put ashes on your head, shave your head, put ashes on your head. Woe is.
Well, I think the whole premise around it is punish men. This is the weird thing that goes online with some of these just morons. The premise is that it was men who betrayed women. Oh, yeah, put that on pause. Men who betrayed women by voting for Trump. So because you betrayed women by voting for Trump, what we now need to do is shave our heads to punish you, because we're going to uglify ourselves so you won't want to have sex with us because you betrayed us because you voted for Trump. This is literally what they're saying. It's bonkers. So that's one movement, the shave your head movement. The other movement is this 4B thing where they're saying we are going to abstain from sex for 4 years in protest of Trump. So they're saying, if you got a husband, divorce him. If you got a boyfriend, get rid of him. You can't have sex for 4 years. And it's going to be this big movement. So this woman here, she's one of these. So
before we play that one, I kind of really want to kind of riff on that really shortly, where this is what they're saying. Part of the reason that they're blaming Kamala's loss on is the fact that Trump went on Joe Rogan, and they're like, he appealed to the male vote. Guys watched Joe Rogan, he won the guy vote. Obviously they had an issue with guys because they had to put out a commercial about I'm a man, but they're using that as just in a way to say that, like, oh, Joe Rogan is a partisan person who put his thumb on the scale by giving Trump this puff piece. And I did not even realize this, but it turns out that Joe Rogan also was willing to have Kamala Harris on his podcast as well. I'm shocked about that. So you guys didn't put Kamala Harris on his podcast. It was open to you. And after the failure, now you say this is this person's fault. Yeah, right.
Well, the funny thing about it too, for me anyway, when I look at stuff like this and I hear stuff about this, they fail to realize that Trump got more female voters than Harris did. Trump won every single demographic.
They didn't come through for her.
Every demographic.
No,
every demographic.
She won. I think she won like college women. And
well, okay. I mean, like the main demographics. Yes, black women voted primarily for Harris. Yay, she got the black woman vote. Good for her. The guy smoked her everywhere. He smoked her everywhere. That's why he's president. So this one, she's classic. Hit the play.
Okay. Yeah, he raffle stomped them.
Not sure why no one understands how I feel. You guys know that my husband turned Republican this term. I don't know why. I threw his ass out of the house. And I have to do more. I don't want to shave my head because that's going to hurt him. I'm going to look ugly. So I'm not doing that. I think I'm going to sleep with his friends. I think that's the only way. I think sleeping with his friends will do. What do you guys think? His liberal friends, of course.
I think you're a whore. That's what I think. I think you're a fucking whore. Like, unbelievable. Like, I feel so bad for her husband.
That right there is the best case of Trump derangement syndrome I've ever seen.
Like, imagine her husband watching that. Imagine her kids, assuming she has kids. Imagine her kids seeing that. Like, what are these people thinking? What are they thinking? What did her poor husband do to deserve that? And she said she kicked him out, and now she's going to go boink half the team? Like, like, I can't believe that we've gotten to the point where people like this exist. This is what 10 years of brainwashing does to you. We're going to need another several years to deprogram her. No,
she's really smart. She's telling people what she's doing is she's you ever see that, what was it, Sunny in Philadelphia episode where Charlie decides he's a feminist?
I don't know the show.
Okay, so it's like, these friends own this bar, and one of the friends, who's like is kind of like a little bit of a dunce, he decides that he's a feminist one day. He comes in, he's like, yeah, I'm a feminist, going to like feminist like protests and stuff. They're like, wait, what? How do you even know what that is? Like what are you talking about, feminist, right? So they go to one of his rallies or whatever, and they can see exactly why he's a feminist. He's like surrounded by really hot liberal women, right? And he's just like, he's like chilling. He's like chilling there in an effort to try to get laid. So you know what this is saying? This is saying like, yeah, that's right. You might get laid if you voted for Kamala Harris card. Whether or not she's going to do that, I don't know. I think it's kind of like playing on that whole thing where it's like,
if I was her husband, I'd be consulting a lawyer right now because she's mentally. I couldn't live with that.
Well, if she takes him out, she doesn't have to live with her anymore.
Well, I mean, but she also, you notice, she said, "I won't shave my head because then I won't look pretty for him," or something like that. So she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. So on the one hand, I kicked him out. On the other hand, I still want to look pretty for him. On the other hand, on the foot, I guess I want to go fuck her friends while I'm at it. Like, it's crazy. This is, like I said, this is what 10 years of brainwashing does to people. We are going to need to seriously deprogram this woman. And we also need to defeat this woke demon that still exists. It's on the ropes right now.
Not even deprogram. Just, okay. Whatever you want to, like, there's people out there that are flat earthers, right? And my mission in life is not to deprogram the flat earthers, right? I don't care. We live in America. You can say what you want, and I'm going to say you're a fool. So
no, but hear me out. What I mean by deprogram is we all, if you don't agree with this woke ideology, if you don't agree with this everything about man is toxic ideology, all this social engineering that's gone on the last 10 years, we got them on the ropes now. The key for each and every one of us is to keep fighting and keep driving the stake through the heart of this woke demon. So how we defeat it and how we deprogram her is by ridiculing it and making it look so obnoxious, which it is. So we need to make it so socially unacceptable for weirdos like this to exist that they get back to normal. This is not this is not the first time this has happened. Go back to the 60s. Same thing happened with the hippies, man. And this is why I've always been saying the woke movement is the 21st century version of the hippie movement. That's all.
The hippies were a little bit more, I think, politically effective than the I feel like you're saying woke is derogatory in a way,
No,
but also
but
what
hear
else
me
is
out.
there to call that?
But hear me out. What I mean by that is, yes, the hippies were out protesting against war and stuff. This woke bunch, they don't protest about anything because they're all like rich white women. So they've got nothing really to complain about. But what I mean about that is if you go back to the 1960s, the hippies were seen like the plague, right? And everybody ridiculed them up to the point where eventually everybody realized how silly they all were, being off, sexually promiscuous, the drugs, all that stuff. Like that all fell apart by the early 70s. And by the 80s, they were all ridiculed. I lived through it, man. Right?
Mm-hmm.
All these former hippies hear me out. All these former hippies back in the 60s, by the 80s, they were all yuppies. And everybody who wasn't a hippie was making fun of them because they were all like, yeah, you guys have now come to our side. It was a big joke, man. You're going to see the same thing with this woke bunch. I promise you that. We just need to finish them off.
I think that the and a lot of I think the hippie movement represented different things depending on who it is that you ask, because I didn't live through the 60s or 70s or 80s, but my experience with hippies is like I've lived in remote parts of California for long periods of time, and there is communities of hippies out there that are still going strong. They're still really hardcore old school hippies, right? And these people aren't.
But you said it best. You said it best. They're ostracized from the rest of society. They're off in some commune somewhere doing their thing because the rest of society's rejected them. That's my point.
But what I mean is that my what the point I'm trying to make is that there are different kind of like camps there, because there are I have definitely run into those kinds of hippies, the sexually promiscuous, very free love and drugs and sex, drugs, and rock and roll guys. But like I feel like a lot of the quote unquote hippies, right, that would think of themselves as old school hippies, deadheads, people like that lived through those eras that I personally knew. They were very, let's say, they tended to not be liberals. They tended to be more like populist leftists, almost like if you subtract a lot of the cultural stuff around it and you leave some of the maybe economic and geopolitical philosophy there, as much as it existed, I think that probably what happened is there was a somewhat effective hippie movement. It was probably infiltrated. This same shit happened to churches. Like in the 1960s, they started trying to infiltrate churches because they realized that it wasn't just the hippies. It was certain academics in certain places that felt themselves very free to speak with their mind, right? And it was also these religious institutions that were anti-war. So they kind of all three of those are now hardcore, for the most part, on board with the way that with new kind of like woke liberal empire. So it's not a threat to hegemony. But a lot of the hippies that I've known, right, those ones that live on a mountain somewhere like that it's not that it's like they what's that no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Where somebody would be like, well, no real hippie would do that. Well, you know what? Different people have different experiences with hippies. And I think that there's going to be a certain set of like a mindset, because I normally don't think of hippies as sexually promiscuous people due to just my personal experience. So
right,
those hippies, I don't know.
But what I'm saying is in the 60s, they were seen that way. In the 60s, they were seen as the plague. They were, and then, we can argue over what their actual mandate was.
I'm learning because this is not an era I've lived through. So.
No, I think for the most part, the hippie bunch were a very small but vocal group. Sound familiar with the wokists? Same thing. right? Different different reasons for being, right? Like, I'm not saying that they were, a perfect match of each other. The hippies were all about free thought, fighting the man, opposing the war, opposing the government, opposing what the government was, telling them to do. They were all about, individualism, for lack of a better word. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, by the way, but for that time, back in the 60s, that was really radical. So they were seen as being extremely radical, far left beings, danger to, social order, all that stuff. Now you fast forward to this woke bunch. Their kind of reason for being, I think, is I think the woke thing is it's a construct. Like the hippie thing, I think evolved organically. I have no doubt that the woke thing was something that was developed by somebody on K Street in Washington. And they then figured, how can we divide people even more? And how do we roll this out? And
I think the woke thing is what you get when you take the hippie thing and you subtract any real serious political like edge to it, to the point where, there's commercials about it's a black woman who is bombing some poor people somewhere. The CIA is recruiting all kinds of people, lesbian, gay, African American, bi, trans, right? Well, there's a place for you here, kind of, and that's because
all
they're
I
trying to
can tell
co-opt
you,
those people and those their maybe sense of social justice or something like that.
I can tell you, Brad, is in about 10, 15 years time, I'm going to run into some guy with a high pitched voice and we're going to get to talking. I'm going to find out that he's got no balls because he used to be a trans guy. And I'm going to have to say to him, oh, you were one of them. Jesus, how did that work out for you, buddy? Right? Same thing. Like they're going to be they're going to be the butt of a joke. Mm-hmm. And that's what the hippies were. That's all I'm saying. But we got to finish them off, guys. We got to get them to that mountain that Bradley was talking about and get them living next door to the hippies. We got to get them away from us. The woman with the shaved head, the whore, we got to ship them off to the mountain with the hippies, get them away from the rest of us because they're bad for society. So
yeah, ship them to wherever, ship them to where Nunya's hippies live. Don't ship them to where the cool hippies that I knew lived.
There are no hippies around me, I promise you that. Because if there was, they wouldn't be
gone.
there.
Oh, see, this is what it is. They've all gone underground, though. They're still there.
I don't know. I live next door to a biker, like a legit biker, like an outlaw. So,
Speaking of outlaws, that's probably a good way to describe those hippies that I knew, because they were doing things like huge, massive illegal pot farms, and they were growing pot like no chemicals, all organic. Everything is like compost and stuff like that. And like those hippies were very different than when you went into the city, and the other like hippies were like very different. Those people were all about spiritualism and all about like the esoteric issues that have nothing to do with real life. And you go to the hippies that live up on the mountain, and they're like, no, dude, we do not tolerate, we grow our own food here. We don't tolerate those gross chemicals in the food that you guys eat down there. No, we have our own we have our own school up here, right? We have a private school up here. All our kids go to this school. It's like they live off the grid. They have generators. There's like one gas station. The nearest town is like, you can't even make it off the mountain year round. You got to fly an airplane to get off the mountain during like the winter, because you have to rebuild the roads every summer in order.
That's where we got to put them. Like as far up the mountain as possible, and just keep them up there. If bear eats them, that's fine. But just keep these mentally ill people away from me, please. I've lost my patience with the whole lot of them.
All right. Well, very, very spicy comments there from Nunya near the end. He's definitely had it with his BS.
Everybody has. Like, who hasn't? Who hasn't? Who hasn't? Right? Like, it was funny. I was reading a comment from, you probably don't know her, but Justine Bateman.
Oh, I was watching, what was it? What's that show? The two Jewish guys.
I don't know. But
I was watching Due Dissidence, and they talked about her. So they said something about, so
well,
yeah, they brought up this actress.
Yeah, she was an actress back in the 80s, so I know her well. And she was like a teen actress back in the day. She was like my age. And she came out with a tweet the other day, and I'll paraphrase it, but she said something along the lines of, I'm so glad I finally get to breathe after walking on eggshells for the last 4 years or something. And I was like, yes, that sums up the mood right now perfectly, right? Ever since Trump won, it seems like this cloud of woke nonsense and toxic masculinity nonsense, like that's all lifted now. And it feels like, wow, I can actually say something again and not, get canceled. And if somebody does try to cancel me, fuck them, let them try, because they won't do it, because everybody's on my side now. It feels good to be alive in the West again. And it's not a man thing. I talked to enough women the last week that there's a lot of women who are pretty happy too, because we kind of see where the wind is blowing, and that's what I say. We just got to keep going. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep ridiculing. We got to keep putting the pressure on our politicians, whatever. And just like I said, destroy this demon beast and throw it to the dustbin of history.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I just want to.
We went really off topic, but anyway.
Yeah, we went hardcore to the territory of who exactly these people are, and yeah, I mean, it's just want to say this. It's nothing but love to my cool hippie friends, the ones that are not like what Nanya describes. Those are the
dirty
ones that,
hippies. You're filthy hippies. I hate you all. Get a job.
My
Get a
friends were not
haircut.
filthy. They were not filthy hippies, and they had haircuts too. But
get a bath, dirty fuckers. And you woke fuckers are even worse. Like, I don't know who I hate more now.
Yeah, I don't know. I got love for my hippie friends, and even if I've got a lot of disagreements, the ones that I can't stand are the people that want to preach to me and want to control that want to like tell me that this is the way that it is, and this is the way that you are for being that, right? Like, if you're not tolerant of this, that means you're that. And, trying to fit everybody into this new kind of dynamic where I can put everybody into a box that puts me in a hierarchy of oppressed and less oppressed, and privileged and less privileged and all that kind of stuff. Those people I can't, fortunately, I've not had to deal a lot with them, but I think those people I have more issues with than people that are really just obsessed health nuts that want to grow their own vegetables. So let's see. Is there anything else we want to touch upon?
No, I think the next week we'll get more information on what Trump is going to do, and
yeah, this is.
I guess we'll just go from there.
It's an interesting space to be watching for sure. The news has become at least a lot more entertaining now again. So
yeah, for sure. I think anytime you have a Trump presidency, just watching the mainstream media lose their minds is entertainment in and of itself. That's assuming that the mainstream media is going to be around. They're all bleeding right now. I just read before we came on, CNN is laying off all sorts of people. MSNBC is laying off all sorts of people because they're not making a go of it. So,
yeah, I mean, Trump might be good for ratings, but people are still sick of the mainstream media. So,
yeah, like who watches MSNBC really?
I do, but that's because I got to know what they're thinking. You gotta keep an eye on what people you
Oh
Like,
yeah, no, but like I'll catch clips and stuff, but who actually sits down with, or like, who does that these days? Like, who even has cable these days? I haven't
yeah,
had cable, man, in 20 years at least. Yeah, like
that's
20
why
years.
I haven't watched TV in probably 20 years. So
Yeah. So that's ultimately what they failed to grasp is the new media. Trump did a much better job of using and utilizing the new media, platforms to his advantage.
yeah,
Harris didn't, and that's why Trump is president.
that's one of the many reasons, as we've
Mhm.
discussed before in our previous podcast. So I think that would be episode 5. Is that episode 5?
Yep.
All right, that was
Yay, milestone.
woohoo. Exactly, made it. So I guess we'll see you guys whenever we upload next stuff. I don't even know. Peace.
All right. Cheers.